over the years, and some persons didn't. So we are reminding persons just to remember those activities as it relates to earthquake preparedness. We're also asking persons now, some persons would have done it already, to continue to check and inspect your buildings for cracks, shifting your pillars, posts, and other beams and structural members. And if there are any damage of that nature, we ask you to get professional assessment to ensure that your building is relatively safe. One of the things that occurred during the event was that it makes it a little bit difficult for the response personnel to call within their call groups and to have discussion about the event, because many persons were on their phones. We want to take this opportunity to remind persons that during an incident of this nature, we know it gets a little bit dramatic and persons want to call each other, but we are asking persons not to use cell phones during these kind of incidents unless it is absolutely necessary, where there is an emergency happening to you or someone close to you. We're also asking persons, some persons are on their way home, or they would have reached home, to do checks throughout your buildings at home, and also to ensure that you're checking for leaks, especially gas leaks, if you have gas lines running through your homes. And at any time there is an earthquake, we want to ask people to remember, avoid using your elevators within your offices, evacuate through using your staircase, or ensuring that you're having your warden system within offices to manage the movement of your personnel in and out of your building, and also to ensure that your wardens will check your building before you go back into your buildings, and avoid using any kind of match or anything like that that can ignite and cause secondary activities as it relates to fire. So those are some of the things that we want to advise the public of, and we continue at the ODPEM to work closer with all our entities to get additional information coming in so we can comprehensively compile and finish our damage assessment. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. So our responses today was mainly to do with assessment of buildings. So we didn't get any calls for any fires relating to the tremor or any reports of injuries, even though we know that there are some reported incidents of injuries. Most of the calls we received would have been predominantly in the KSA metropolitan region. We got a call for Church Street for a collapsed structure. That structure was unoccupied, thankfully. And there was also a collapsed structure in St. Thomas, Rumble in St. Thomas. There were no reported injuries because there was nobody at home at the time. We still have teams of firefighters out in the field making assessment, because like I said, most of what we have been doing since the tremor was felt is to conduct assessment of buildings, whether they are schools, other government institutions, ministries, agencies, and departments. And of course, we'll have some calls from the private sector. In all of this, we still have Jamaicans who are making prank calls to the fire brigade relating to the earthquake this morning. We would have had reports of buildings collapse on Halfway Tree Road when we turned up. It was false, and numerous other calls around the corporate area that turned out to be prank. I want to use this medium to ask members of the public, please desist from the practice of making false calls. What it does is tie up resources that are needed elsewhere, and so it makes our job that much more difficult. So please desist from the practice of making prank calls. We continue to do our reconnaissance across the corporate area, because that is where we have gotten most of the calls. And we'll continue to tally the assessment as they come in. We are working closely with the municipal corporations in terms of making an assessment and making a judgment call as to whether or not persons can reoccupy the building once they would have exited the building. So we continue that, on the ground, and we are hoping that by tomorrow, we'll have a better picture as to exactly what we are up against in terms of the number of structures that would have been affected that may necessarily warrant some amount of remedial repairs and so on. So for now, that is what I have to report on from the Jamaica Fire Brigade.
Prime Minister, that was a report, a meeting of a National Disaster Response Committee will be convened tomorrow morning for us to look at what took place today and to make plans in going forward. And the country will be updated based on the progress of the information that is being gathered and the outcome of tomorrow morning's meeting. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Minister, and your team. Now, in the immediate aftermath of the earthquake, there was a break in communications and in electricity. I'm going to invite Minister Vaz to come and give us an update as to where we are with these utilities. Minister Vaz.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. So I can state that there was some load shedding earlier this morning after the earthquake by the Jamaica Public Service. I'm happy to indicate that the recent report that I have up to a half an hour ago is that all areas have been restored. And if there's anyone who does not have, I would like you to please reach out to the JPS immediately so that we can try and see what is happening. But the report that I have is that all areas across Jamaica, electricity has been restored. The other report that I have in relation to portfolio responsibility is the two international airports, the Norman Manley International Airport and, of course, the Sangster International Airport, both fully back up and running without any delays. The JUTC also no issues in terms of the schedules for the rollout of buses. For this afternoon, you would have seen a buildup of traffic based on obviously persons being sent home early and kids being sent home early, but the JUTC is fully up and running. The other important area obviously is Petrojam, and that's essential service. And I can indicate, despite rumors that were being circulated, that there's no interruption and no damage to the refinery, and therefore everything will continue as normal for tomorrow morning. In terms of the maritime space, the Maritime Authority has indicated that there's no disruption in relation to, obviously, our maritime space in terms of vessels coming in and leaving. So for those five critical areas in relation to the Ministry of Science, Energy, Telecommunications, and Transport, I can indicate that all is normal. You would have heard, obviously, that the earthquake, the epicenter, was in Portland between Buff Bay and Hope Bay. There has been one report of a collapsed building in a place called Content. There are others reports that are unconfirmed, but obviously the authorities will be making checks in relation to, and of course, if there's anybody that has suffered any damage, obviously, we'd ask you to reach out to the authorities within Portland so that we can start to look and do assessments. But assessments will be done. There are some landslides, Prime Minister, colleagues. There are some landslides, obviously, from the disruption of the roads, but all is good in terms of the essential services. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to invite Minister Matthew Samuda to give a brief report on our water system.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Just to advise that we have been doing our checks. There's no major damage to any of our water systems. As the public should be aware, we have over 750 pump stations. We are going through the process of checking each one to ensure there hasn't been any major damage. We have completed the checks of the Mona Reservoir and its associated systems. There is no damage there. We are going through the process related to the Yalas pipeline and indeed the Hermitage Dam, which we know is aged infrastructure. We do expect that in the coming days, we will see a few pipe breaks, especially where you have older ductile iron pipes because of the amount of seismic activity that we would have seen today. But Prime Minister, we will continue to monitor the situation very carefully, and we will be checking the larger systems first, and we will complete our assessment in the next 48 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I have here with me our national engineers, the NWA, I know that there would be significant concerns, particularly in areas close to the epicenter, where the soil type is such that it would be susceptible to this kind of seismic activity. So I'm going to invite Mr. E.G. Hunter to come and give us a report, both on any landslides that have taken place, blockage of road infrastructure, or any damage to our built civil infrastructure, bridges, etc. Please come to the podium, E.G.
Thank you, PM. Good afternoon, everyone. Just returning from a reconnaissance visit, I'd like to report that in respect to road and bridge infrastructure, fortunately, we have not suffered any damage of any significance. There has been a few landslides, mostly in the eastern part of the country, Portland, St. Mary, St. Anne, but our parish teams have been mobilized, and these will be dealt with precipitously. We obviously will continue the assessment in the next couple of days. Fortunately for us, most of our bridge infrastructure is built to modern standards. They have been designed for to be earthquake resistant, and the evidence is that they have stood up reasonably well so far. In response to a specific request made by the Prime Minister, we also did a rapid assessment of a number of important government buildings, starting with the Office of the Prime Minister. Based on the assessment that we did this morning, we concluded that there was no structural damage to the building, and it was buildings were ready for habitation. We also visited the Ministry of Finance at Hero Circle. There is a noticeable separation of two buildings, so the older buildings, Block E and Block F. And based on our initial assessment, we have concluded that the buildings can be occupied, but there is a stairwell which joins the two buildings, and that has separated. So we've recommended, and I've spoken with the administrative head of the Ministry of Finance, we have recommended that that stairwell not be used until remedial work has been carried out. We also inspected the main building, G block. There are a few cracks, but they are not structural in nature, so we do not perceive any issue with that. We also visit the Shalimar complex in Vineyard Town. Unfortunately, one of the buildings there has been sufficiently damaged to the point where I've spoke with the financial secretary, and it's our recommendation that that building not be used until certain structural support has been put in place. Our team will return tomorrow, and in association with representatives from the Ministry of Finance, we will scope the required works which are required to make that particular building habitable. But until then, we recommend that that building not be occupied. We also visited the office of the Accountant General on Dominica Drive in response to a particular request. They too had a few surface cracks, but nothing structural, and it's our recommendation that that building can be occupied tomorrow in the normal vein. And finally, we concluded our reconnaissance at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade in downtown Kingston. That building is a 10-story building. It sits on, I think, 74-foot diameter concrete piles which go down 100 feet each, and is therefore structurally quite robust, in spite of the fact that there are a few surface cracks. There's nothing which is structural, and so that building is fit for habitation, and remedial works to the building will comprise basically surface and aesthetic enhancements. So that accounted for what we did. Okay, so as I indicated before, the major issues that we have, particularly in the eastern and northeastern parishes, relates to rock slides, and those will be dealt with by in fact, those are now being dealt with by our parish staff. You may recall, we've been having rains in that general area for the last week or so, and so it's business as usual. The parish team will respond to those rock slides. So we don't anticipate that any of those roads will be compromised to the extent that they won't be usable. Thank you.
Thank you, EJ. I'm now going to invite Minister Tufton, who will tell us about the human side of the disaster, the trauma that people have been experiencing as a result of this earthquake. Minister Tufton.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, colleague ministers, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. So, Prime Minister, we did a fairly extensive assessment since morning. We were actually on the 7th floor of the ministry's head office when the quake shook, and it was quite a traumatic experience for us. So I can well imagine the rest of the country or those who experienced it. However, there are two elements of it quickly. The northeastern, western, and southern regional health authorities have not suffered too many damage in terms of their hard infrastructure. The quake was felt, but it wasn't nearly as intense as on this side where we are, which is the Southeast Regional Health Authority. Majority of the facilities, however, having been inspected, remain intact, except for a few. In St. Thomas, no major damage. Operations continue as normal, both at the primary and secondary level. Some facilities have been closed, just out of taking caution and doing some further inspections. In St. Catherine, we had a few incidents. An autoclave fell at Greater Portmore, was damaged. Some structural damage at Waterford Health Center and Old Harbour Health Center, which requires some assessment. There are minor cracks at Spanish Town Hospital, but operations not affected. There were 14 children seen at the accident and emergency department of the Spanish Town Hospital with episodes of anxiety. They were clinically stable, reassured, and sent home. 2 patients were seen at the Linston Hospital in relation, of course, to the quake. In Kingston and St. Andrew, 5 primary care facilities noted some structural damage, mostly minor, but a full assessment is to be done. These are Waterford, Harbourview, Bull Bay, Mavis Bank, Stony Hill, and Edna Manley. Some facilities are still without electricity and water, but it's being restored gradually. I think Minister Vaz spoke to that. Public hospitals are operational, all public hospitals with minor damage. Bustamante Hospital for Children, Kingston Public, and Victoria Jubilee, and St. Joseph's. At St. Joseph's, the damage was really the field hospital. We had to relocate the patients from the main building, and the National Chest Hospital, Hope Institute, and Sir John Golding were not affected. The University Hospital of the West Indies had some structural damages. I think you spoke to that. It was primarily the administration building, and they were asked to vacate until a more intense assessment is done. And the private entities, St. Andrew, Natal, and Medical Associate, reported. Cases involving primarily students and suffering from anxiety. KPH had 1 trauma patient who fell from a tree with a resultant musculoskeletal injury. Bustamante Hospital reported injuries in children from nearby primary schools. At 3 p.m., 21 children were brought in from 6 primary schools. 4 were admitted for observation, 3 with mild head injury, 1 post-seizure is a known epileptic patient. All are clinically stable, and 10 have been discharged so far, while others are awaiting observation period to be completed. Most were anxious and had no physical injuries. So generally speaking, as is the case that we expect with emergencies of this kind, natural disasters, the result is trauma depression, anxiety, stress. And so we're going to be putting out some advisory from the ministry to identify some of the symptoms of that, which includes difficulty breathing, chest and muscle pains, feeling faint, dazed or lightheaded, stomach aches, feeling of anger, anxiety, and so on. And that can be a challenge in terms of persons going about their normal life. And so we recommend to Jamaicans who may be experiencing those symptoms to, firstly, they can consult their doctor, whether in the private or public space. I must say that the accident and emergency wards are full for the most part, particularly the urban centers, because of other issues. But if you have to, you should. But there are other less intense ways to manage these types of mental wellness or mental health challenges. Talking to a friend or family member, encourage others to remain safe, getting rest, reestablishing a return to routine, and just asking for help if you need that help. Prime Minister, we'll continue to monitor the environment. We have activated the emergency response unit, and that monitoring will continue both at the level of assessing the structural infrastructure, but also the human impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The purpose of this press conference is to reassure our public. Whenever there are disasters, it lends itself to a feeling of uncertainty. And I got a sense today that though the earthquake, compared to earthquakes in other areas in other countries, did not result in significant damage, it certainly had a psychological impact. And in fact, we know that in the 9 parishes that were affected or felt the earthquake, there was some disruption in our economic and social activity, particularly in Kingston, where our workforce, the majority of our workforce would have been sent home early, out of consideration for everyone's safety and mental well-being. So tomorrow, I want the country to come back to work. But when we come back to work, it is with the knowledge and understanding of what we need to do in order to be prepared. We can't stop these, natural events from happening, but we must be resilient. We must be prepared. And a part of our preparation is that your government must provide you with information, particularly in today's world, where you would have heard from the head of our fire brigade and others, that misinformation is indeed a part of our society. Some people may think it's funny, it's a prank. Some people may think it's entertainment, but it has a real impact on how it misdirects our resources. Resources that could have been used to properly identify and properly assess and give service to people who are in need, end up being misdirected because we can't take a chance. Once someone calls for help, we have to respond. And you would have seen circulating on social media several images that are not true. We have seen items circulating that infrastructure is damaged or a plant is damaged or a critical utility is on fire, when that is not the case. So the duty of the government is to provide you with information so that you can be the judge of your circumstances and mitigate the uncertainty and face the future with confidence. So we want to get back to work. We want to keep our GDP growing. We want to make sure that Jamaica is the place for peace and prosperity. So with that, if there are questions from the media. Oh, and one other thing which was important, Minister Tufton addressed it. Our children, based upon some of the reports I've been getting, and there have been a few children admitted to some of our hospitals, it has had an impact on them, and it has created anxiety. Now is a good time for parents to talk to your children about what to do in the event of a disaster like an earthquake. We in Jamaica say, duck, cover, and hold. Remember that. And by the way, the members of the cabinet who are here, can say proudly that we all ducked and we all took cover under our desks. And some of us didn't have anything to hold on to. But we evacuated orderly. We evacuated the building orderly. So it's very important that our teachers and our parents have this conversation with our children. This is a very important practice that we should develop in our children. And indeed, right across our public and private sector, safety wardens it is a requirement that you have safety wardens appointed in your institutions. You should now be carrying out your drills and being prepared. We have noted that there would have been as many as 10 or I believe 12 aftershocks noted. Persons would have felt maybe 2 or 3 of them. I certainly felt 2. So the earthquake process is still ongoing. So we should just all be at an elevated sense of preparedness in the event of any other occurrence. So if there are questions, hopefully not for me, for the ministers who have the line responsibilities, who could be better able to give you the details.
Sorry, Siobhan Campbell, Nationwide News. A quick question to you, Prime Minister. We're thankful that there was no loss of life and no major damage, but I'm curious. It's good to have a situation where we can prepare for even more major events. So my question is, based on what has happened today, this crisis, what is your assessment of the state's ability to respond in these situations?
A very good question. I actually meant to address that in my opening comments, but I think it displayed itself. Jamaica has a very well-developed disaster response mechanism. You would have seen it in action during COVID. You would have seen it in action earlier within the term where we've been threatened by hurricanes. It is very comprehensive. It takes care of the political directorate of the country. Then it goes down to the executive, to the public sector bureaucracy, and to our partnership with private sector and civil society. So it's very inclusive. So there is a disaster response committee that works and is provided with legislative authority. Minister, we had a discussion as to whether or not we would activate that. I suspect Minister may bring that together for the purpose of information. Generally, our disaster response entities know what to do. So this would include the Jamaica Fire Brigade, the JCF, the JDF. It would also be coordinated by ODPEM, which has the duty to coordinate all the entities. But the NWA, the NWC, all the utilities, they all know what to do. So there is an established protocol, which is why we're keeping this press conference to say to Jamaicans, you can have confidence in tomorrow, in the future, that the government is prepared and we are able to respond. If the situation were worse, my own belief is that we would still be able to respond. Yes, we would be stretched because I'm not here saying that we are well-resourced and we have all the necessary equipment to be able to respond. But certainly in terms of management, in terms of technical know-how and experience, and in terms of the commitment and will to keep Jamaica safe, yes, we are very strong in that regard. In terms from a fiscal perspective as well, yes, we have put in place fiscal buffers to ensure that we are able to respond, certainly within the limits, but we are able to respond. And as those fiscal buffers become stronger and our economy becomes stronger, we will invest more in equipment and technology, which will help us to be more resilient. But the greatest investment, Siobhan, the greatest investment is improving our building codes, and every Jamaican who is building, build stronger and follow those building codes.
Andrea Chisholm from TVJ. Prime Minister, I'm not sure if you have any update. We've gotten reports of structural damage at the University of the West Indies. I'm not sure if there's any update on that, if we could get it here.
I believe E.G. Hunt had mentioned something, the University of the West Indies Hospital or the University of the West Indies University School?
University. We also saw some reports of some damage at Taylor Hall. So I don't know if they are formal or not. So we're asking for clarification.
Okay, as I indicated previously, we at the NAA did a rapid assessment of specific institutions that made requests of us, and that included the Office of the Prime Minister, the Accountant General's Office, 2 locations for the Ministry of Finance, as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's what we did this morning. In addition to our normal portfolio of roads and bridges. I did get late this afternoon a request from the real estate board and a query PM that the Seabed Authority, they are requesting an examination of their facility so as to inform them if they can reoccupy the building tomorrow. So I just got that from the Permanent Secretary and Minister of Foreign Affairs. So we will treat with that so soon as we leave here. We have not gone to the University Hospital of the West Indies, nor the UWI campus itself. As I indicated before, we responded to specific requests today. Few government offices and institutions have requested our services. I did have a conversation this morning with Minister Mackenzie and the CEO for KCMC in terms of the capability of their engineering department to work with us so that we can together carry out these rapid assessment. The rapid assessment is what you do initially, and then that will lead to more in-depth analysis as time goes by. So we will look at those.
Just to give you some assurance, so during an earthquake, structures will exhibit damage, but not all damage is structural. And therefore, you need the professionals to be able to ascertain whether or not the damage is structural, which would mean that you may not be able to occupy the premises. The NAA certainly could not assess and certify all the buildings right away. It is therefore the duty of the operators and managers of those facilities to, as far as possible, engage the professional services, and if they have a challenge, particularly if they are within the public sector, to reach out to our national engineers, the NAA, who will then pool our engineering resources through our municipal authorities and other entities that have such engineering capabilities to do the assessment. I'm certain that the University of the West Indies would be doing their own internal assessment. In fact, they would form part of the nation's engineering capabilities. They have an engineering school. So I'm certain that they would be looking at that. I have, however, received some reports of some schools that have reported that they have some damage. And I'm certain that the building department of the Ministry of Education will be going to inspect those to ensure that the schools that have reported damage, that the damage is not at the level where it would necessitate the closure of the school. So I'm certain that that process is being undertaken as we speak.
Okay, and very quickly, Prime Minister, I think this would be more for local government Minister Desmond Mackenzie. The Commissioner for the Fire Brigade mentioned about the section of the collapsed building at the intersection of Charles Street in downtown. I think he alluded to it in his presentation. What more will the ministry be doing to address derelict structures across the country, which are unoccupied?
Well, the question of derelict buildings have always been a major issue. Now that we have seen the intensity of earthquakes across the country, one of the bases for the meeting tomorrow is for us to examine the areas of concerns, especially like the one that you have raised, so that we can take the steps to deal with those situations. But also there is the other side of the coin, where those persons who have these buildings, it is their responsibility to ensure that those buildings are shored up in a way that it does not extend harm and danger to the wider public. But yes, that will be among the agenda item for the meeting tomorrow.
All right, I know you
Prime
have
Minister,
to return to your regular programming. I want to
Yes.
thank everyone for
Prime
listening.
Minister, if we could, because there is one other that our colleagues from CVM who asked us, please, and in fact, they had sent it real early. There was no early warning system or message, I beg your pardon, no early warning message sent to the population. Did ODPEM trigger its messaging alert system? And how will it work in the future as well?
I'll allow the ODPEM to answer that question. Unfortunately, earthquakes are one of those systems that they do have technology that can give you alerts for tsunamis that are as a result of an earthquake. I'm not certain that you have an early warning system for an earthquake itself, but I'm not the professional here, so I'll allow ODPEM to answer.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. You're correct, sir. There is really no early warning systems for earthquake. An earthquake is a rapid onset event, and most of our early warning systems are really, so far, are really for your slow onset events, such as hurricane. So basically, that's how it is in terms of earthquakes. And you will get a kind of information system as well around tsunamis, which take a little time to be generated. But for a rapid onset event, that you really don't at present have an early warning system for that. From a technology yes.
All right, so again, let me thank you for listening. And again, I know these disasters can have an impact on confidence and how we view the future, but your government is strong, our public response is strong, and we are a resilient country. So let's get back to work, mindful that disasters do happen and we have to be prepared for it, which includes getting our children into this mindset of preparedness.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you to members of the Cabinet, the Permanent Secretary here at the Office of the Prime Minister, and to the members of the media for the live coverage. Television Jamaica, Nationwide, RJR, and Love were all live with us this afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone. Please be safe. Good evening.